Matt and I were jumping on today to talk about the embodied processing practitioner training, something that we have been putting a lot of work into over the last 12 months, particularly, but obviously a lot of our own lived experience and training and working with clients leading up to that. So we've kind of put our heart and soul, our blood, sweat and tears, not that I've bled at all, but we put a lot of energy into this, sort of everything, all of our knowledge that both myself and Matt have accumulated up until this point in our life into this training. And it's a big one, isn't it, Matt?
It's huge, yeah. We've put absolutely everything into it.
Yeah. So look, this live today, we're just going to be touching on a few really basic dot points. I've just got 4 dot points here, and we'll probably go into a couple of tangents with those, but we're just going to start off with what is EP, what is embodied processing, who is it for, what kind of people would it be a good fit to take this training, and then also, the different conditions or issues that people have that EP can help with. And then at the end, we'll touch on how it actually works, the nuts and bolts of it. And I'll actually, if I can, it looks like Facebook Live now have the share your screen option available. So at the end, I'll share the EP flowchart, which is all of our students get to download, which sort of gives a basic rundown of what a session looks like and how it all works. So we'll share that at the end. But today's just a real introduction. As I said, Matt and I have been working on this for the past year or so. The actual course is launching on February the 15th, so all the course material, everything will be available from then. Right now, we've launched the pre-sale or early bird, where we've got some people in that already, which is fantastic. That early bird pricing ends tomorrow, which is January the 15th, a month before the actual course is available. But we'll get the student community up and running probably in the next couple of days, which is a private Facebook group for all of these students / practitioners, where we can create a real community, a real tribe of people who are on this journey together, like-minded individuals. And I'm sure there'll be some friendships in there formed that last a very, very long time. So I think we might as well get started. 8:33. Let's do 2 more minutes, and then we'll start jumping into it and tell you guys about EP. Tell you what it's all about. Embodied processing. Might be worth talking about while we're waiting. What is being disembodied? Disembodied is a state that we find most of our culture and our society in these days. Disembodied means that we've come out of the direct experience of our heart, of our body, the direct experience of life, so to speak, and we've come up into the cognizing, the judging, the categorizing mind. And so we live our life stuck up here with very, very little time spent down here. And there's a very, very good reason for that, because what's happened is living down here has become very uncomfortable for most people. It sounds like a good idea to become more embodied and to try and live more in our body and be in the present moment. But if that's uncomfortable, we're going to keep escaping up into the mind. I think one of a great spiritual teacher, Michael Singer, says the head is a place the soul goes to escape from the heart. And that's kind of a really good quote when it comes to disembodiment, because if something in the body becomes too painful, we naturally go up into the mind. And, the mind's trying to help us, so to speak. It's trying to help us distract from what's going on in the body. And so this is why so many of our culture, when I say we're disembodied, so many people, I'm sure you hear, Matt, with clients, it's like, I overthink. And it's like a pandemic of overthinking for a long time for people, where they just can't shut up this voice in their head.
Yeah, definitely. And, we come up into the mind, as you said, to keep ourselves safe from pain, and then we actually get addicted to staying up here. And embodiment, it's a process of coming back down into the felt sense of our experience. And if we're trying to resolve a lot of the things that we're trying to resolve, lots of psychological issues and physiological issues are driven by an underlying trauma. And if we're trying to cognize about the trauma, it's no different to try and think about a broken leg and heal it. It's actually not in that dimension. It's down in the physiology, and we have to actually learn how to safely, with a proper resource, come down into the felt sense of our body. And safety is the key word there, because if we don't feel safe to do that, then we're not going to come down You know, physiologically we can't. You know, our survival drive is going to fight that completely because it doesn't feel safe to do so. It's actually our survival drive that kicks us up into our heads, into cognition, into interpreting, judging, labeling. There's nothing wrong with cognition, but like it becomes self-destructive at a certain point, and we have to learn how to come back down and be in our body. You know, if we were to ask the average person on the street, how often are you aware of your body throughout the day? You know, most would say never. You know, unless they actively practice yoga or, you know, different forms of somatic
or stub their
inquiry
toe.
techniques. Yeah, or stub their toe or hit their shin or something, you know. Then it's like, oh, there's my body, you know. But I think, you know, coming down, you know, as they say, the journey from the head to the heart, or the journey from the head into the body, it's like the longest journey that we will ever take. You know, because we're going against all of our conditioning to do that, and this is where safety and resource and self-compassion is the key, and having a technique like EP can help facilitate that process.
Absolutely.
Or that journey.
I mean, people go on these spiritual pilgrimages where they'll go hundreds or even thousands of miles, and I think it's all an attempt to make that journey, which is about a foot long from the head down into the heart, and it's the one that is the hardest to take for a lot of people. So, you know, if we think about EP and kind of, if we can break it down really simply, it's when we're going to touch more on this as we go through this live, but it's finding, cultivating, and experiencing a resource of safety and support. Okay, and a lot of people in culture today don't find that resource. We don't have a resource of safety within our bodies or anywhere else. So there's this gnawing fear that's happening all the time. And like Matt said, a lot of the work that we're doing is with our actual survival physiology, the survival drive that happens within us. You know, if we think about, you know, the tagline for EP is the bottom-up approach to healing trauma and nervous system dysregulation. So, you know, what does kind of the bottom-up approach mean? Well, if you think there's something called the true iron brain, you can research that. And so there's kind of three areas of our brain based on our evolution through time. And the basic one is the reptilian brain. And this is just in charge of our fear mechanism, our fear response and survival of the organism. And then on top of that, we've developed this mammalian brain, which then we start to talk about some more complex emotions. And those complex emotions of sadness, of anger, of all these things that as we became mammals, we started to develop. And then on top of that, we have the most recent part of our brain that we've evolved, which is the neocortex. And this is where most people live. And what happens, our survival drive is dictating so much of our behaviors in our life today. It is the driver behind so much of our dysfunction. Most things that we do are based on that survival drive. And what happens, the top-down approach is trying to use the cognizing mind to help deal with this underlying survival drive. And the top-down approach does have its place in some circumstances, but it has fallen short in so many areas. And when we're talking about trauma, you know, me and Matt, we cover this in the course, the way that we use the word trauma. You don't even have to use that term because some people are funny with it. You know, sometimes we'll just say undigested life experiences, okay? Or someone like Gabor Mate would say there's capital T traumas and small t traumas, whatever you want to call it, stresses, you know, whatever it is. We are trying to use the cognizing mind to help deal with those, and it is a very, very laborious task. It's very, very hard. If it does work, it takes a very, very long time. In most cases, it doesn't, and it causes more and more re-traumatization and deeper neurological pathways in the brain. So with EP, we're getting into our survival physiology, followed by our emotional centers of the brain, which then we start to move into the neocortex. That's what we mean by the bottom-up approach. And like I said, when we're talking traumas, we're talking about undigested life experiences. And then nervous system dysregulation is kind of the nervous system dysregulation is kind of the result of many of these undigested life experiences. You know, a healthy nervous system is able to come out of a fight, flight, freeze response into a connection and engagement response very easily and very automatically. But most people's nervous system has adapted in a dysfunctional way where we don't fully come out of a fight or flight response or out of a freeze response. So we find ourselves either shut down some of the time or a lot of the time, or too activated and chaotic some of the time. And we tend to, without getting too much into polyvagal theory at the minute, we tend to bounce between those two states. And so all of these coping mechanisms that we start to use, like drugs, alcohol, gambling, shopping, sex, food, work, relationships, it's kind of all an attempt for us to bring our nervous system back into some sort of homeostasis and some sort of regulated state.
Yeah, so like when we go through an event and we go up to say fight, flight, freeze, and it's interesting as human beings in Western culture, our lives are rarely threatened. The survival of our body is not threatened that often. That not many people starve to death, in Western culture. But what happens is we still go up into survival responses, and we can go up into survival responses just from someone insulting us, from words. It can activate the same survival physiology as if our lives are threatened. It can. And, what happens, like you said, there's little T traumas and big T traumas, a bunch of micro traumas, say like, someone at school laughing at me, or, something like that, that might just give me a sort of shutdown fawn response. All these little traumas, they build up, so like, to use Judith Richards' metaphor, it's like a balloon that gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and one day it goes pop, and we end up with full-blown PTSD. So, like Ryan said, we don't have to use the word trauma. We could just use the words stored survival stress. So when we have stored survival stress, our nervous system can get stuck in a survival response, fight, flight, or freeze, and then it shows up as anxiety, or the symptoms are anxiety. The symptoms can be depression. The symptoms can be addiction. The symptoms can be a whole range of things that we see with people's mental health, and we're stuck trying to treat the symptoms. We're stuck trying to resolve it up here, but it's actually driven by an underlying survival physiology that is sort of stuck on, so to speak. And so, like me and Ryan have spent years and years and years studying this stuff and living in that state. Like I've got a long history of really severe PTSD, getting like the whole time it felt like a lion was running at me, and then I had to use drugs to bring myself back down. It felt like I was going to get eaten by a tiger at any moment. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, and it's on a spectrum. So we can get stuck at that really, really high level where it's like a panic attack 24/7. It feels like we're in danger 24/7, or it can be just low level anxiety, low level fear, this feeling something's not quite right. Something's wrong with me, something's wrong with the world, or, financial fears. We're always worrying about that sort of stuff. And it's just an activation that's happening there. And we can never really come back down to rest and digest, or like you said, connect and engage. And so this process is something we've put together based on all our research, all our trainings, all the one-on-one sessions we've done over however many years. We've put our heart and soul into this, and it's a topic that I'm so passionate about, because like I see it absolutely everywhere, and it feels like I'm seeing something that's really, really obvious, but not many people are picking up on this as the underlying driver of so much of our dysfunction and so much of our suffering. And to bring people back to a sense of safety is a process. We have to readapt our nervous system in order to come out of these survival, fight or flight responses. And it's when we're stuck in these spaces, in these survival responses, we lose the ability to connect. Everyone knows that saying, like you feel alone in a room full of people. It's things like that start to happen. These are all the symptoms, because our nervous system gets wired for protection. We adapt in order to protect ourselves. And so love becomes threatening, connection becomes threatening, other people become everything becomes threatening, until we're so isolated within ourselves, and we're just layered with these walls of armor. And so coming back to to our ground, coming back to that sort of rest and digest space where we can live from presence and be in presence is a process of sort of peeling back the onion. And we have to do that from a container of safety. If we don't have the proper resource, it's like we rip back a layer and we build another one. But when it's done in the right container, with the right resource, in the right space, in a healing bubble, and a person is able to cultivate inner resources, then we can start to safely peel these layers back without building more.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Matt's, you said, how we start to see it everywhere. And it's set up to, I think the numbers like up to nearly 80% of doctor visits now are in some way stress related. And it's like, well, what does that mean, stress related? It means that that's our survival mechanism having an inability to turn off. There's nothing wrong with stress. Stress is great when I think it's called eustress, which is healthy stress. And that's things like if I go and work out at the gym, I'm stressing my body. If I go and do cold therapy, I'm stressing my body. But the stress goes up and the system comes back down. And that's actually healthy for the body. But for most people, this survival physiology capacity is constantly turned on. So the stress never fully comes down. And if the stress never fully comes down, then we start to run into issues. Like you said, it can be mental health issues, addictions, but also physical issues as well. Like if you look at the ACE study, which is basically around people who are very, very stressed due to adverse childhood experiences, direct correlation, not just with mental health things, but also physical things like cardiovascular disease, cancer, asthma, all of that kind of stuff. So, this underlying survival response is so important. So EP is around saying we need to cultivate and find a resource of safety, okay? And everyone's going to be different with how long that takes to be able to cultivate that source of safety, because some people that me and Matt have worked with haven't felt safe their entire life. And I'm sure even some people watching this now can identify with that. When's the last time you felt completely safe? And you think, don't know, can't remember. That was my experience up until when I got past my addictions and everything. So we find and cultivate this resource of safety. From that place of safety, we can then start to go back and digest these previously undigested life experiences. Okay, when we start to combine those two, cultivating the resource and digesting previously undigested life experiences, it means we grow in capacity. And that's the language that me and Matt use. We grow in capacity as a human. Our field starts to grow. When we grow in capacity, it means we're more able to hold different experiences that happen in our life. I use the word tolerate, but Matt doesn't like the word tolerate. I'm kind of starting to understand why, because tolerate kind of means we're putting up with something. But if I don't use the word tolerate, we can tolerate more and more. It's like once our capacity grows, when experiences in life start to happen, it's not like, language starts to change. Language starts to go from, I'm sad or angry and I can't handle this, to I'm sad or angry, but I can handle this. I can hold this. I can tolerate this, okay? Because life is always going to bring up these emotions. These emotions are something that all human beings experience. I remember reading somewhere, it's not our fault these energies exist, the energies of sadness and guilt and fear and shame. It's not our fault. It's just part of our human experience. But if we grow in capacity, we are better able to hold whatever comes up in our life. And we're also able to go from, like Matt said, go from protection to connection, or go from survival to creation, which is the biggest step. And that's what it's all about. Because if I'm in that survival mode all the time, every single decision I make about my life is based on survival or fear. So fear is making my decisions for me. If I'm going out in a social interaction, I need to have a few beers before I go. Fear and my survival mechanism is telling me that that's what I need to do. Yeah. If I'm in creation, none of that's required. I'm excited about going and meeting some new people, connecting, finding out something new about another person, and not being self-conscious about what they might think about me. I just start to look at the same life through a very, very different lens, through that fear or creation, which is what it's all about. So it's building resource, digesting previously undigested experiences, and the result of that is growing in capacity, this process is all about. So if we talk,
agree.
Did you add to that, Matt?
I had a few things as you were talking, but then I became really engaged and listened, and
I kept talking.
They were. Yeah, you did, and then you kept talking.
It'll come back. It'll come back.
It's sort of like, as we grow in our resource or in our ability to hold our experience, it's sort of like our body has this unbelievable intelligence to heal itself. Like, that's right, you were mentioning cancer and cardiovascular disease and all that sort of stuff. And it's sort of like, if I cut my hand open, I don't actually need to do anything for my hand to heal itself. My body's intelligence will heal that wound. It's unbelievably intelligent. It's the same intelligence that digests my food, that beats my heart, that grows my fingernails, grows my hair, keeps my body alive, breathes my body while I'm asleep. It's like an unbelievable intelligence that's there. And so the body has this underlying blueprint of health. It knows what it needs to do when the disease comes in. But when we're trapped, we have all these layers of trapped survival stress within our system. It throws things off kilter. We end up with digestive issues and, like all the things you said, all these medical, physical symptoms start coming out. And, the same is with this survival stress. The body knows how to discharge, say, a sympathetic nervous system response, fight or flight response. The body knows how to come out of that and back down, but it's sort of like we get in the way. We put a lid on it. But if we cultivate it, and also it doesn't feel safe to process it in the moment, it's sort of like that moment was too overwhelming to actually digest in that moment. So then it's something in our unconscious, puts it down, pushes it down into the unconscious, keeps it in the body and says, we'll deal with that later. because for survival, it may not have been appropriate to process that in the moment. But as we grow in our capacity to hold the resource and be a container for these experiences, they actually can move through on their own. You know, so if I have, say, fear come up, and my first instinct is to get away from that fear and go and distract myself, that fear then gets stuck as survival stress in the system. But if I've grown in capacity enough to really meet that energy, you know, so this is what it's really about, meeting and holding, you know, our physiology, the energies that happens. Look at the word emotion, energy in motion, to meet these responses in our body. And when we can meet them safely, they can actually start to process themselves. And the body's intelligence does the work for us. We just hold the space in the container. You know, it's really a beautiful thing when you realize, like, you know, say you've been practicing this stuff for a couple months, and like you said, your language changes, the way you meet yourself changes from, you know, oh, I can't deal with this, to, oh, it's the same experience, but I can actually be with this.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like, yeah, what you say, our body wants to heal, like all of these, the survival stress and the trauma and everything. Our body wants to let it go, but we're keeping it in there. Now, we're not doing it consciously. It's not your fault. Yeah. It's very, very unconscious. That's why we have to bring it to the light of our awareness so we can start to create the right environment. Because if I have that cut on my hand and I give that cut the right environment, as in I keep it clean and, you know, keep it nice and, you know, whatever it needs, then yes, the intelligence of the body will just heal that cut beautifully. But if I keep playing with that cut, rubbing it, putting dirt in it and just picking at it, then it won't heal, or it'll take a very, very, very long time to heal because I'm not creating the right environment. And that's why EP is, we're creating the right environment to let these things start to release in a large part on their own. So yeah, so good analogy there with the cut. So the next dot point's, who is EP for? Well, look, the embodied processing practitioner training, I would say, is for 3 different types of people. One of them is people who are just really interested in their own deepening. You know, people who are on this path, they're on this path of, you know, we don't really like the term personal growth or spiritual growth, but you're on the path of understanding yourself on a much deeper level, you know.
And growing in your capacity
to
deepening your fully.
Experience of you being in this world, right?
Embody
I always
your
tell people,
authenticity, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's people who are after their own deepening, okay? Also for people who maybe have had their own experience of life and they're looking now to maybe become a therapist and start to work with clients or people close to them and start to, you know, give back and help people by using this modality. And then the third type of people is people who are already therapists. So you might be a therapist, practitioner, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever it is, and you're looking to add another tool to your tool belt, which is embodied processing. So based on those 3 people, we kind of have 2 different certifications, so to speak. So the person who's doing it for their own deepening will go through all the massive amounts of course material. The course material is, there's like over 90 videos on everything. If you talk about our human experience from the point of trauma, emotions, conscious, unconscious, spirituality, archetypes, addictions, foundations as a practitioner, like all of this stuff, as we've just got massive amounts of course material to go through for your own deepening, and then joining our student community. So there'll be a community of practitioners and students where we get to connect, have sessions done on you, practice the techniques on each other, and all of that for your own deepening. And there'll be a certain certification for that. For people who are who are therapists already or looking to become therapists, there'll be a little bit more involved in gaining that certification, because we obviously want people very, very, you know, skilled in this process and have gone through enough practice sessions, and also doing a session on myself or Matt to be properly assessed to be certified to work on other people. So they're kind of the 3 different types of people who EP is really suited to, and there's 2 different certifications for that. So what can EP help with? That's the next top point. We've kind of covered it already. When you're talking about our underlying survival physiology and a lot of these stored emotions or undigested life experiences, they show up differently for everyone. You know, if our nervous system has adapted to be in a, you know, sympathetic nervous system response or a dorsal vagal response, which mightn't make much sense if you haven't, you'll understand in the course, and you have these experiences, then it shows up in different ways for different people. And it can show up after 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, but that might be depression, it might be anxiety, it might be signs of PTSD, because we do talk about acute trauma as well in the course. It can be addictions. It can be these dysfunctional relationships. It can just be all around stress. Yeah, like I said, stress is something that so many people are struggling with. It'll kind of show up differently for everyone. So, you know, when we're talking about all of these, me and Matt would call them surface level manifestations or symptoms, EP can help with digging underneath and finding out what's happening from a survival point of view. And it's okay, because you'll have clients come in, and me and Matt have both seen this, who might be doing some talk therapy with a psychologist, or they're doing a bit of nutritional work and that kind of thing, and that's all fine. You know, the more angles that we attack things from, the better. But where we're concerned is we're concerned about what's lying underneath. Yeah, what's lying underneath the surface, you know, of these behaviors.
Yeah, so I sort of look at it as like, you know, the symptoms are sort of the leaves on the tree. You know, so the branches grow out and produce anxiety and all that sort of stuff, but we have to actually work with the root system. And, you know, like when you were saying, like it might show up as anxiety or depression or, you know, shyness even. You might have like personality traits that are actually, that you learnt personality traits and you learnt them to survive. It's like we learnt to be depressed because being depressed might keep us safe from the world. You know, if I'm depressed, I stay home, I'm isolated, I might just play video games all day. Or if I'm anxious, I'm hyper vigilant, I'm always on the alert. So all these things, if we really trace them back, you know, our human experience, if we trace it back to the core, it's always based on survival.
Yep.
And everything we do is inherently based on survival. You know, and like I was saying earlier, what happens then is we become completely wired for protection, and depression can just be a protection mechanism. Anxiety can be a protection mechanism. And it's our system just getting stuck in these states, you know, shut down, fawn freeze, which, as you said, was dorsal vagal or sympathetic fight or flight. You know, so we can swing between the two. That was my experience. And so much of what we do as well is just to, you know, so we might overeat in order to regulate our nervous system. We might use drugs in order to regulate our nervous system. So, you know, there's investigate your own lives and see what sort of things come up.
Absolutely. Sorry, my phone rang and I'm on hotspot, so it might have frozen for a second. So I apologize, everyone. We're back.
You froze. I kept talking.
Okay.
I just took a risk.
Hopefully everybody heard. So yeah, from what I was gathering, Matt was saying we ping between these two nervous system states. So you know, without going too much again into polyvagal theory, what we want to do is we want to start to bring our system or readapt our system back into what's called a ventral vagal response, which is that connection and engagement. You know, and oftentimes we've adapted to a sympathetic or a dorsal vagal, which is shut down or too activated, and we want to start to find that safety and that resource, which just makes us feel more safe in our body. The more safe we feel in our body, the more comfortable we feel to come out of here and into here. And then the more that we live life out of here, the more we're able to actually experience life. You know, imagine what experiencing life would be like if I can look out the window here at a tree and just witness the tree, instead of saying, what type of tree is it? Is that tree bigger than that tree? I wish that tree was cut down so I could get that view. You know, it's coming out of this judging mind and into our actual direct experience of life. And this has a flow-on effect to all areas of life. You become more present, whether you're working with clients, in your relationship, you know, whether you're just catching up with a friend for a coffee, and instead of thinking about what you're going to say to them or all this kind of stuff, you're just with that person 100%, and you can connect with that person with your heart. That's what embodiment's all about. So let's finish up with the last dot point and give you the nuts and bolts of how EP works. What I'll do, I'm going to share my screen here because we do have a flow chart. Let me see if I can do this. Just one sec. I'm just going to share my entire screen. All right. Share. All right. I hope you all can see that. I can't see the comments now that I'm out of that window. Can you see that flow chart,
I can,
Matt?
yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. So this is basically the basic rundown. Now, there is so much information and everything that we go through with each one of those steps and training people how to go through all these techniques. But this is basically what a embodied processing session looks like. Okay, so we're talking about, you know, obviously rapport building with the client. We go through all about how to be able to do that, understand what the client's nervous system response is going on for them at the start of a session, but also checking in with us, because it's very important for us as a practitioner to know what state our nervous system is leading into a session. We have downloadable session sheet where we can ask some initial questions for the client, so we can understand what is to be worked on in that session. You know, they might come in with an idea of exactly what they need to work on, whether they're having trouble in relationship, whether they're having trouble at work, whether they're having trouble with low self-esteem, whether they're having trouble with something that happened to them when they were 5 that they keep thinking about and is causing a lot of an emotional reaction. But if they have trouble, we have certain skillful questions that we can ask to find out what's best to be worked on. We then have 3 different options for resource. So we do a lot of talking in the course material around resource and why it is so important. And we help people cultivate a resource, and we can do that with 3 different options. And a lot of the homework that we give clients in between sessions is building and building and building upon that resource so it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And we use something called kinesthetic anchoring, where we can anchor that resource. We've got wrist there, but we can use any part of our body. We can use a space, but we just use an anchor so that we can start to really become super familiar with whatever our resource is. Some people can't find safety in their body, so we do offer different options for that. When we say then inviting in the trigger, you can use, you know, me and Matt like to use the term orphaned part. You know, there's a part of us that splits off when we have an undigested life experience. Our psyche splits because that experience, whatever it is for that subjective experience of that person, is too painful to experience. So that part splits off. And that's, once again, that is a survival mechanism. Trauma is very, very intelligent. Matt likes to call it an intelligent idiot because it's very, very intelligent in the moment. But if we don't go back and start to digest and let these responses complete, then they show up as dysfunctional behaviors in the future. So we start to invite in this orphan part, whatever that part looks like. And that can be a memory, that can be an image of mum or dad or someone else in their life. It can be an archetypical image. It can be a symbol. It can be a metaphor. We go through all of that and how to work with those in the course. We then start to discern which emotion is involved with this orphan part, and we work out what the most predominant one is. There's a whole video and section in the course on overcoupling of emotions. We can overcouple our emotions with our fight, flight, freeze response, and we need to uncouple them and start to work with them one at a time. And we help clients start to do that, and clients will be, based on maybe the work that they've done or their own emotional awareness, you know, they'll be able to do that easier or a little bit more difficult depending on the client. We then start to find the origins of this emotions. We tend to think that the emotions that we feel in our life today are new ones. Like, you know, if someone says something to me at work and I have this massive angry or sad reaction, we think that situation has made me sad or angry. It hasn't. It's just stimulated an orphaned part of us. And we need to try and find the origins of that. And we have skillful questions that we ask the client around where the origins are of this particular emotion. And then we go into the working with and processing thoughts, images, and sensations. And we have 5 different processing techniques here. And we teach you those one at a time. Okay, because it's important to have different techniques for different clients or different situations. And the idea is, once we get those techniques individually down pat, and once we start to practice these in the student community, we then start to bring them together. And it becomes a bit of an art. Matt, would you say? We start to bring these together, and we might use 2 or 3 of these processing techniques even in the one session.
Yeah, we use 2 or 3 of them at the same time. You know,
same time.
Yeah, it's merging is its own technique, but we can sort of merge them together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
have to do a demonstration at some point.
Yeah, and so because me and Matt, what we've done is we've taken what we've done over the years and what we've learned, and we've tried to just give it this roadmap, and that's what this flow chart is. So we start to work with these sensations with the client from that place of resource, that place of safety when I was talking about it, and then we move into finding some resolution or completion. And whether we've found the resolution or completion with the particular orphan part we're working with, we may need to go back up and work with some emotions, and we simply follow the chart again from the discerning the emotion section until we start to process what needs to be processed, and we find that resolution or completion. Now, resolution or completion can look like, the survival mechanism or an emotion completely disappearing, but it can also just look like we now have capacity to be able to hold these feelings as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a particular goal in mind like that. And then there's a whole section on how we actually finish up a session and check in with our own nervous system and the client's nervous system.
Perfect.
Okay, I'll stop sharing. And so that's the flow chart. That's basically what a session looks like. And we can work with many different orphan parts in one session, or it may be, you know, a whole session is just dedicated to one orphan part. We never know. We are led by the client's unconscious, so to speak. Now, whilst EP, you know, a lot of question people might have is EP, you know, hypnosis? The way me and Matt define it is no, it's not. Yes, a client will have their eyes closed during the process, and we're kind of bringing up maybe some parts from the unconscious that they're previously unaware of, but it's definitely not hypnosis. It's not suggestion therapy or anything like that. It is a digesting of previously undigested experiences. Would you agree, Matt?
Yeah, like if someone's educated or trained in many different therapies, they'll probably find lots of different therapies in different areas of EP, from Gestalt to parts therapy to Kilby inquiries to whatever. There's just, you know, but like what we've done is tailor it all to really focus on the survival drive, the survival physiology.
Yeah, survival physiology. Because survival, when we think about the survival mechanism, it's kind of a loop. Like Peter Levine explains it this way, which is really beautiful. We love his work. It's like a loop. So that we go into from a relaxed state into a fight, flight, or freeze response based on the fear mechanism, and then ideally after the threat or perceived threat has gone, that loop completes, and we come back down to a calm and relaxed state. And you might think of like the impala getting chased by the lion, who's happily nibbling the grass, then a lion starts chasing it, massive flight response, starts running. It may even have to go into a mobilization response and play dead at some point. If, however, it gets away, then all of a sudden, a few minutes later, you see that impala nibbling the grass again, looking very, very relaxed. The reason impalas or other animals are very good at that is because they don't have a conceptual mind. They don't then think, where's the lion, where's the lion, where's the lion? And they might, based on their programming, maybe not go back to that same spot to feed in the future, but they won't constantly think about it and be looking over their shoulder as to where the lion is, you know. And this is what we do as human beings. This is what we do with this, you know, this neocortex that I was talking about. It's so fantastic. I mean, it's sent us to the moon, for God's sake. It does amazing things, but we spend most of our time worrying what people think about us. We spend most of our time worrying that we're not enough. We spend most of our time not doing things that we want to be doing because we're too scared to do them. And that is our underlying survival physiology at play.
So it took us to the moon, but it also keeps us running from lions that aren't there or are no longer there.
Yeah.
You know, there's an intelligent idiot.
It is. So we don't want to, we're not saying we get rid of the conceptual mind, but we use it. We use it as a tool, and we use it a bit more intelligently as opposed to using it for worry. And the only reason it does worry is because right down underneath there is a survival drive that is stuck on, and no wonder we're having worrying thoughts, because we're getting signals sent from that deeper part of our physiology up to that cognizing mind. So look, that's a basic rundown of what EP is. You know, it really came off the back of, you know, myself and Matt having our own lived experience with this survival drive with drug addiction, then becoming practitioners in the space, connecting many years ago, starting to develop this philosophy based on our own experience with clients. You know, we started doing some online courses, which we've had like probably, I think last I checked, over 1,000 people through those courses, and we just started developing this process as we were going along, because we realized that we were working in very, very similar ways, even though we didn't know, with clients. And also we were sort of running into the same patterns and nutting out where a lot of these patterns and everything came from, and embodied processing is the results of that. And we are super, super excited about it being available for pre-sale now and launching in about a month's time. If you have any questions in the comments, Fiona, I shouldn't have watched this. I plan on not doing any more courses or study this year. Sorry, Fiona. Sorry. Angie says, my son has bacterial meningitis. I'm so sorry to hear that, Angie. His body's all over the place. Yes, I had a sister who had meningitis as a baby. Yeah, I can very much identify with that. And I wish him all the best, obviously. LA, nice to see you, LA. Great analogy. That was probably one of your analogies you're saying that to, Matt, but thank you. If you have any questions, put them in there now whilst I do the classic sales pitch at the end. Just to let you know, the early bird pricing for embodied processing finishes tomorrow, January the 15th. At the minute, we've got a massive discount. It's $1,000 off at the minute. So if you want to jump on, I'll put the link. Melissa, if you're watching, can you put the course link in the comments? If she doesn't, then as soon as we jump off, I'll put the link to the course page in there. If you have any questions that you would like to ask privately, just DM us at the Centre for Healing, and I'm happy to answer anything that you want to answer about the course or anything that we've spoken about. And we're really, really excited about not just sharing the course material, but I'm super excited, and so is Matt, about this student and practitioner community that we're creating. Because the beautiful thing about, being online now, and COVID has pushed things online even more than they were, is that we get to connect with people all around the world. And we've already got people enrolled from Holland, from the United States, from Australia. And it's this like-minded people, this tribe of people who are, on a path and get to connect with each other. And I know that going through, practice sessions, we've found it with root cause therapy at the centre, you develop a really strong connection by being able to work with people, in this safe healing bubble, like you put it, Matt. And the more that we help each other, then the more that we can help the collective.
Yeah, and the plan is to make it, I use the term, like a evolving sort of ecosystem. So, as more information comes out, more studies, because there's lots of studies being done around trauma and survival stress and the sort of like the felt sense, lots of studies being done around that. And as more comes out, we want this to grow. Me and Ryan are very open-minded, and we don't want to lock ourselves into this is the model and this is the only way to view things. We want it to be growing and evolving. And so if you feel like being a part of that, please join us, because we want other people to bring stuff to the table also.
This is evolving, like myself and Matt are evolving, like society's ideas of these things are evolving. And like I said, a lot of things, that me and Matt see as just perfectly normal and obvious are sort of starting to get a bit more mainstream. I saw a really big article recently from a well-known psychologist who coined the term cognitive bypassing, which is like a bypass of using the cognitive mind. I'm like, oh, it's a wonderful term. It's wonderful to see psychologists, who are into talk therapy start to talk about this stuff, how we get caught up in the cognizing mind, trying to change thoughts and change the external world to make us feel better inside. And, I like to say that's like chasing a rainbow, that new job, that new boyfriend or girlfriend, that new friendship group, that moving to a different state. It may offer some temporary relief, but if we haven't dealt with the underlying survival and emotional body, then we're going to keep running into the same feelings and emotions, and the same things are going to keep happening in our external life, and it's going to become like Groundhog Day. So we want to make Groundhog Day like his last day in the movie, where he gets it right.
I've never seen it, but I've heard it referenced so many times. I've never actually sat and watched it though.
I haven't for years. Maybe we should have a movie night and we'll bust it out. It's a very good show. So thank you all for tuning in. I know that a lot of people will be jumping on and watching the replay, because this is sort of the middle of the day in Australia, and for the people in the Northern Hemisphere, it's kind of the middle of the night. So there'll be a lot of people watching the replay. Any questions that you have, just put #replay, hit us with the question, and myself or Matt will jump on and answer any questions that you have. Melissa in the comments has just put the link to the course page. So if it resonates in any way, then jump on there. If there's someone in your life who you think this might resonate with, then please pass that on. We'll be very, very appreciative of that. And as always, we are very, very appreciative of your time. It is said the greatest gift that one human being can give to another is the gift of their attention, and we thank you so much for that. Thanks, Matt.